In the late 2000s, games were becoming more and more about trying to target everybody. The Souls titles took a huge risk, choosing instead to be a gamer's game and focus on the hardcore. Dark Souls exploded past expectations, and now, terms such as Souls-like and developers citing Dark Souls as inspiration has become so common, it's practically a meme. So, why do you need to know Dark Souls? It would be unfair to say challenging games weren't being released in the late 2000s. However, more frequent checkpoints were becoming common in popular games. Titles such as Fallout 3 allowed players to save any time they wanted, while titles that included frequent deaths, such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare, included so many checkpoints that death wasn't a huge punishment, as well as a regenerating health bar. Other games, like Dead Space, allowed players to adjust their difficulty, allowing anyone to play at a pace they found comfortable. The trend was clear: accessibility. In order to ensure more sales of AAA titles, games needed to be accessible so anyone of any skill level could play them. In 2007, From Software took to developing a new hardcore game for their limited audience. As a smaller Japanese company, expectations were low, as was the budget. The game was to be titled Demon's Souls, and was intended as a spiritual successor to From Software's Kingsfield titles. Midway through production, the game was a mess, and From Software took a risk deciding to let an Armored Core 4 answer coder, Hidetaka Miyazaki, take the helm as the game's new director. Demon's Souls wasn't doing well. I figured if I could find a way to take control of the game, I could turn it into anything I wanted. Best of all, if my ideas failed, nobody would care. It was already a failure. Miyazaki's concept was to reward players through accomplishment, and while difficulty wasn't the goal of the game, this meant drastically upping the challenge in order to allow players the greatest sense of accomplishment. The intense difficulty this challenge created was a potential issue. It was a hard sell, and From Software opted to strategically avoid telling their Japanese publisher, Sony Computer Entertainment, this particular detail. To be quite honest, we didn't really mention the difficulty of the game when we did the presentation to Sony. Of course, I communicated with our producer at Sony, Kaji-san, but he actually agreed with me. He felt if we were too forthright about all the death with the marketing people, they would have run a mile. So, that's why we had to be a bit sneaky about it. After playing 2 hours of an early build of Demon's Souls, Shuei Yoshida, Sony Computer Entertainment's head of product development, concluded, "This is crap. This is an unbelievably bad game." In fact, Sony felt so poorly about Demon's Souls, they refused to publish it outside of Japan, and eventually Atlus took the publishing reins to ensure a Western release. With no marketing behind it and little publisher support, Demon's Souls sold surprisingly well for a brand new IP. Despite Shuei Yoshida's remarks, it gained mostly 9 out of 10s from reviewers and was number 2 in the Japanese sales charts at its release, selling 37,000 copies in 7 days, making it the 4th best-selling new IP on the PlayStation 3 at that time. In North America, it sold over 500,000 units in a year's time and became a PlayStation 3 greatest hits title. And with its success, Hidetaka Miyazaki and team toiled away at the successor to Demon's Souls, Dark Souls. They were given a larger budget for the new title, but despite Demon's Souls' prowess, never expected Dark Souls to have the impact it did. Releasing in 2011, Bandai Namco published Dark Souls with a new marketing campaign and the catchphrase, "Prepare to die." While Demon's Souls sold 500,000 units in a year's time in the States, Dark Souls sold nearly 1.2 million units in just 4 months in North America and Europe, and in less than 2 years it had sold nearly 2.4 million units worldwide, far surpassing its predecessor. Dark Souls takes players on a journey through the decrepit and once mighty land of Lordran. In ancient times, the land was a grey haze of arched trees and everlasting stone dragons. However, suddenly the first flame arose and brought with it the mighty Lord Souls. Gwyn, the Lord of Light, and others to inherit these souls, fought the stone dragons for dominion of the land, winning and bringing about a new era, the Age of Fire. However, as the game begins, the fire has been fading, with Gwyn's great kingdom now a ruin of itself, and the once mighty lords desperately trying to reignite the flame and continue their reign. It's in this once mighty kingdom that players find themselves on a quest to help reignite the flame, if they so choose. The most immediate recognizable aspect of Dark Souls was its difficulty and lack of hand-holding. Like video games of the past, Dark Souls chooses to let players learn how to play the titles through death. The game never tells players where to go or how to deal with a certain situation, expecting players to be smart enough to learn from mistakes. The bosses themselves were immensely difficult for first-time players, requiring players to learn boss strategies through death. They were meant to appear as intimidating and hopeless, only furthering the reward and satisfaction players felt upon their completion. The level design put emphasis on both the horizontal and vertical planes, with pathing wrapping into itself, creating a Metroidvania-style feel in a 3D title. Meanwhile, the game's story is hidden in environmental details, optional NPC dialogue, and reading item descriptions. Upon its release, while the title was highly praised, it was often criticized for its lack of story. It was thanks to the efforts of YouTubers such as Epic Namebro, VadiVidya, and Quaylog, as well as several Souls community members who chose to search for the hidden story and revealed Dark Souls' dreary and hopeless plot to be just as involved and interesting, if not more so, than any other modern game. It was a puzzle players needed to put together themselves and helped to create a community around the title. Dark Souls also featured countless hidden and obscure secrets, including entirely hidden portions of the game, which would often require players to share with each other online in order to discover them. These sections of the game were not only important to the plot, but also reminiscent of old school games and secrets, which included optional content. In fact, community became a hugely important aspect of the title, both in sharing secrets and for the multiplayer. Demon Souls, and subsequently Dark Souls, presented a subtle, always online feature. Your player was always connected to the world, and you would see traces of other players in ghosts and bloodstains. These players could be summoned into your world to help with difficult bosses, or could invade your world in an attempt to halt your progress. While this subtle, always online feature has become fairly standard today, it was both unique and revolutionary with the Souls titles. With the multiplayer also came one of Dark Souls' most famous memes, Giant Dad. As players were figuring out how to exploit the multiplayer to their benefit, one of the most popular builds was the Flipping Havel, a build that was min-maxed, or statistically upgraded, to be the best possible build. From Software patched Dark Souls to make this build no longer relevant, and as a joke, Only Afro created a video around the Giant Dad, a build that was jokingly meant to be the new min-max build and simultaneously poke fun at the Dark Souls multiplayer community. Only Afro's video, He's Back, exploded with nearly 3 million views. His video helped popularize the phrase, "What are you, casual?" and, well, what is it? The name of the mocking in-game gesture in Dark Souls. Joke videos around Giant Dad became popular, and references to him were even included in the game Bloodborne. As Dark Souls included only a small number of NPCs, many of these connected with the players, and one of the most popular was Solaire of Astora. Solaire chased after the sun and introduced players to the Praise the Sun in-game gesture. Praise the Sun has since become a popular phrase among Souls enthusiasts, with Praise the Sun emotes indicating the in-game gesture circulating around the web. While Dark Souls never sold as strongly as titles such as Grand Theft Auto, its impact on the gaming industry has been immense. Not only did it bring From Software into the spotlight as a major developer, but it has and continues to influence a wide variety of developers. Games such as Borderlands 2 purposely reference Dark Souls with scenes of bonfires. Meanwhile, Dark Souls' brutal difficulties become more acceptable, with titles such as Lords of the Fallen, who are inspired by its challenging gameplay, becoming more common. Another major aspect of Dark Souls was its lack of allowing players to save. In Dark Souls, players may rest at bonfires, and upon death are immediately returned to the last bonfire they rested at. The penalty for death is losing all of the player's souls, which act as experience for leveling up and currency for buying in-game items. At the time, this feature was considered brutal. However, it has since been utilized by other titles to high accolade. Shovel Knight, the 2014 indie title, was inspired by Dark Souls and utilized this aspect of checkpoints to high praise. In fact, it's often cited as modern game design, and it spanned from none other than Souls. Meanwhile, titles such as Destiny cited Dark Souls as a huge inspiration, intending to tell its story in a similar fashion, through environmental detail and item descriptions. Even more importantly, the passive always online feature of the Souls franchise can be seen in Destiny, as there will always be other characters exploring and taking on missions as you're doing the same thing, a feature Destiny was praised for and that was inspired straight from Dark Souls. Other titles to cite inspiration from the Souls series include The Witcher 2, Star Citizen, Payday 2, Zombie U, Titan Souls, Sultan Sanctuary, Death's Gambit, and many more. Dark Souls has become one of the most influential action RPGs movies of its time, influencing an array of genres and building a giant and passionate gaming community behind it. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed my new series, You Need to Know. If you did, then you may enjoy my comedy retrospective series, The Super Shows, or my Chronicles of Gaming show. Also, a huge shout out to my friend Matt, who's helping me produce this series. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.